الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Inshallah ta'ala, briefly we'll talk about something that is related to women in Islam with regards to relationships. And just to be specific, inshallah ta'ala, when it comes to the relationship with one's husband and the Tawheed of Allah, the oneness of worship of Allah is the objective. And the understanding of al-akhlaq or manners or relationships, it has to be with this foundation that, as always has to be mentioned, that the relationships that we have in this life is not a matter of rewarding one another or being even with one another, or what do I get from the relationship versus what I'm receiving, and these types of things, but rather it's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. So you can look at it as from the perspective that it's a one-way relationship, meaning as a duty that a person is supposed to observe in their ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are حقوق and wajibat. حقوق and wajibat meaning, the حقوق and wajibat, the حقوق means the right that a person deserves. And this is what makes us more, if it's correct to say, as human beings, we are greedy when it comes to this. We want our rights to be observed. But there's wajibat. There are obligations that upon us that we have to observe, and we have to be patient in fulfilling them. In the day of judgment, and this is how the hearts are always attached to the hereafter. In the day of judgment, what's going to happen is that what people would regret is with regards to their wajibat, with regards to their obligations, did they fulfill it or not? Al-huquq, or the rights that they receive in the day of judgment, if they didn't get it, it's not going to be a sinful thing for them. Actually, they can get rewards by this. When someone's supposed to fulfill their rights but they didn't, then it's hasanat and sayyat in the day of judgment. So the successful person is the one that comes in the day of judgment, had fulfilled their wajibat, fulfilled their obligations, and whether they get their rights observed or not, that's not themselves. This is other individual. This is other people. وَكُلُّكُمْ أَتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, each one of you comes in the day of judgment fardan, alone. We return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our a'mal, not the a'mal, the actions of others. Our actions, and this is what we're responsible for. Therefore, in any relationship, it's extremely important to observe first, if we are truly in the state of al-iman and seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and our hearts attached to the hereafter, to be concerned more about our wajibat as individuals. And at the same time, the huquq that we're supposed to, which is part of the wajibat, but the huquq that we're supposed to fulfill to others. And if you look at it from that perspective, you would find that, again, the tab'a, or the innate of the human beings, is in such a way that they flip the matter the other way around. They're more concerned about their rights to be observed, and if they lack in their obligations, they ask for forgiveness, or they say it's okay, they deserve this or they deserve that. So this is where the struggle in oneself to make sure that we fulfill the rights of others. So the rights to be observed, which is something that needs to be mentioned first, of course, but when we talk about the things that are things that might happen, as the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in the hadith, and this is again, I'm addressing the sisters here. So not to be taken as, what about the men? No, this is something else. We're not talking about, we're not talking to men now, we're talking about to women. So especially the wife. So the one that is being a wife, or the one that is going to be a wife, to understand that rights is something that is essential, regardless of whether the husband fulfill his rights or not. this is not our subject now, because we will be asked about each and everyone's, our own self and our own actions. So some of these ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that for some reason people sometimes they take it with unease, which they shouldn't. And they take it in a way, sometimes the shaitan, he works on it. And he makes people, or look at who's talking, or why you're saying this. How about the men? What is the right of the men? Again, this is not the subject. So, for example, the hadith of Mu'adh radiallahu anhu. And this shows again the submission to Allah and the commands of Allah and the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. He said that the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, لو أمرت أحدا أن يسجد لأحد لأمرت المرأة أن تسجد لزوجها. So if I would have commanded anyone to make sujood to anyone else, which is of course shirk and it's haram for someone to make sujood to anyone, I would have ordered the women to make sujood to her husband, or the woman to make sujood to her husband. And the Prophet ﷺ did not mention what type of a husband, good husband, bad husband. This is about a woman to her husband. So this level of right, it's a huge right. And of course, the hadith, no one would understand from it that the woman would make sujood to her husband. This is, again, it's a very clear if, which is never going to be, because this is haram. But if anyone that would make sujood to someone else, it would have been commanded for the women to do sujood to her husbands. That means what? It means no one for a woman has more rights on her more than her husband. Her husband comes first. This is the deen of Allah. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from her. And that brings all kinds of goodness in it. It is not about favoring the husband. It's not about the husband should live like a king and the woman doesn't get anything and she's abused. No one would ever say such a thing, because there are rights for the husband for him to observe. He has obligations that he has to observe, these obligations. Right? So again, we're talking here about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ talked about women, so that again we don't come in the day of judgment not fulfilling the obligations upon us. And also when the hadith in the Sunan where Aisha radiallahu anha, she asked the Prophet ﷺ, Man ahaqqu nasi bil-zawj? Who is the one that has more rights upon the husband? He said, Ummahu. He said his mother. So that means for the man, his mother comes first. And for the woman, her husband comes first. And it doesn't have to be a dispute. And the man, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him the ability that he would not bring the matter to a dispute. And I will always say this when there is, billah, when the matter reaches a dispute because of the mother of the husband. For example, they're all living together, which is one of the rights of the wife, that she lives alone. She has her own place to live. And the husband, he needs to figure out something to take care of his mother. If he has to work more, if he has to spend more, right, to make sure that his mother, for example, is right next to him, that he sees her every day, she has rights on him, all of these things to be observed. But again, when there's a dispute, I always mention this to both the husband and the wife. If there's the dispute because of the mother, she's being part of every problem that they have, she wants to know everything, they get her involved in everything, or she involves herself, which is wrong. And that's why the husband should have the ability and the manners and the mudara, the way that he deal with things, that he does not allow for his mother to get to know what is happening in his household. With all perfect manners, with all goodness. And if she gets, for example, upset that she is not informed of what all the details that she doesn't need to know is happening in the household, that means what? That means he has to be extreme in being kind to her. Right? So that means he has to increase the birr and the righteousness towards his mother, because now she's getting upset. But not that he would tell her everything. And his wife said this to him, or her parents did this to whatever, or they were fighting and the wife said, this is something that should be forbidden completely from involving one's parents into the situation, both sides. But again, I would still, when I say, if the matter reaches into a dispute and the wife doesn't stand the mother of her husband, for example, she should not show that to her husband, right? But the deal should be that they should have an agreement, both the husband and the wife, that if in a situation where the mother is present and she corrects something that the wife is doing, her son's wife is doing, in front of her son, for example, and that's something that is not pleasant for the wife to hear this. So I would say to them, what's between both of you, meaning the husband and wife, is much greater. And it's in a level where you should make sure that you don't get involved, the parents, in it. But what I mean by this is, let the mother, and again, I'm going to be extreme here. I hope that you understand what I'm saying. So I would say to them, let the mother of the husband, in this case, win in that circumstance. Let her win. Meaning, let the husband, unless it's a matter of wrongdoing, it's a different situation. Let him not to show his mother that he is siding with his wife. But, to calm the situation down, yes, for both of them, without siding into any side or whatever. But he already made an agreement with his wife that he's not going to displease his mother. Right? Why? Because that's the mother. So, but without causing the wife to be in some difficult situation or harm, afflict, or just words, exchange of words, things like this. So sometimes some of the wives, they want their husband to respond back to his mother. Say to her that she is wrong. She said this to me and she needs to know that she is wrong. Do not make this something that the husband would do to his mother. Right? This can be in a different settings where that he does not upset his wife or his mother. But anyway, this is something that they can agree upon. And then after they're alone, then the husband should do extra means to please his wife. And this is their agreement, so that because when they're together is far more than when he is with his mother, for example. So, and then when the Prophet ﷺ was asked, Ya Rasulullah, وَأَحَقُّ النَّاسِ بِالزَّوْجَةِ, who's the one that has more rights to the wife? He said, زَوْجُهَا, meaning her husband. So he did not say anyone but her husband. Why? Because of again, this great rights of the husband upon the wife. And therefore, there are certain things to be observed. For example, for the woman, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said also in the hadith in the Sunan, that forbidding the woman أن تصوم, that she would fast, وزوجها حاضر, if her husband is present, إلا بإذن, except by his permission. Right? And this is, Siyam is one of the greatest acts of worship. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade her from this except by the permission of the husband, because of the great rights that he has upon her. And there's also the other hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is an authentic hadith, وَلَأَنْ تَلْعَقَ صَدِيدَ جُرْحِهِ مَا وَفَّ. That means if she would lick even the pus from his wound, is not also fulfilling the rights of her husband. So this is to show it sounds in such a way that to make this tahweel, to exalt the matter, to make the matter very clear that this is the rights of the husband. It's such a great right that needs to be observed. And when the woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, and she was complaining about her husband, so he said to her, "Inzuri ayna huwa minki." Right, so look, where is your husband towards you? Right, so look how he is. Right, so and how he is to you. Then the Prophet ﷺ, he said, what level he is in you. So he said then to her afterwards, هو جنتك ونارك. He is your Jannah and he is your hellfire. This is how things are related to the hereafter. He is your Jannah. That means he's the gate for you to enter Jannah, or the gate for you to enter the hellfire, wal-'ayadhu billah. So therefore, the wise woman, the one that listens to Kalamullah, the speech of Allah and the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, she is observing this. And she does not become arrogant in dealing with her husband. And she is the wise one when it comes to these types of things, especially when he said, Huwa jannatuki wa naruk. He is your Jannah and he is your fire. And therefore, the hadith also of the Prophet ﷺ that إذا أدت المرأة فرضها, if she fulfills her obligations, the 5 daily salah, وصامت شهرها, and she fasts the month of Ramadan, وحصنت فرجها, and she protect her chastity, وأطاعت بعلها, and she obeyed her husband, she will be given the choice. خيرت من أي أبواب الجنة الثمانية شاءت دخلت. She would be given the choice from whatever gate of Jannah for her to enter. So, because what's supposed to be upon the husband of other deeds, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy. That means she doesn't have to do certain things, but it's all in the place of being obedient to the husband and to fulfill his rights. And since he is the one that is obliged to take care of the financial responsibility of the household, 100%. She has her own financial identity, and if she can give zakah and so on. But he has, of course, the financial responsibility of the household, and also the other acts of duty of the deen. Usually the difficulty comes when we hear these ahadith. Either the husband is not fulfilling his duties that he's supposed to do. That's why it makes it very difficult for a righteous woman to fulfill her duties versus a man that is not doing his duties. The second thing is when we live in a life where the religion is not the very basic or the most important thing in one's life. When religion is just something on the side, this is not how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum understood the religion. When we always talk about how to understand the religion of Islam, the way that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum understood it. When you read about the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, you think that they have no other job in their life except the deen of Islam. Even though they were, occupied with all kinds of things. But the things that moves them and makes them happy or sad or anything is about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the deen is what initiate things in him, this is what everything is about, the deen of Allah, the seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. The hearts are fully attached to the hereafter, then the matter becomes easy. All kinds of difficulties and miseries and problems, once the hearts are attached to this worldly life and choosing the pleasure of this life over the hereafter. Everyone will be happy if the hearts are attached to the hereafter alone. So again, in relationships, and we're talking here about how the woman should observe the rights of her husband. If you think of a man also having to observe the rights of his wife, not according to what he wants or what she wants, but according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him. And you would find ayat in the Quran, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, live with them with goodness. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِسْتَوْصُوا بِالنِّسَاءِ خَيْرًا, be kind to your wives, to have the best manners and the best conduct. And we have in the Prophet ﷺ the best example. Never hit anyone, never say bad words. Prophet ﷺ never said a bad word to his wives ﷺ. So this is, if someone has these manners, he is responsible 100% for the financial being of his wife. And he is extremely kind to her. He does not hit, wal-'ayadhu billah. He does not verbally say anything bad to her. Treat her with respect. Right? And is someone that is obedient to Allah. And he makes his salah perfectly in the masajid, in the house of Allah. He makes sure that he earns what's halal. And all of the different responsibilities and the other responsibility in his life. Right? Then you would see how evil it is if a woman, her husband is like this and she is not being obedient to him. And the other way around, the same thing. So now when we say these types of things, the first thing that comes into our hearts is, but he's not like that. Or if a husband is hearing about this, but my wife is not like this. Is this is the first concern, or the concern should be, what am I doing as a human being listening to this? So it's very easy to be criticizing or to be critical to others. But what matters, again, as we said, in the hereafter, and this is the subject of the hereafter. If someone comes and asks a question, my husband is not doing this, or the man is saying my wife is this, can we talk about it from the hereafter after perspective? Things will change. Things will become easy. But as long as we agree that this is our concern, then the goodness of this life will come in place. Right? So it's not about the pleasure of this life that we're seeking. So people, when they get married, why they're getting married? It's for the hereafter. This is the first thing. And of course, the other things would fall in place. But why? It's because of the hereafter. A woman, as we mentioned before, without a husband, she's missing out. Without missing out, meaning in the good deeds that she needs to observe for the hereafter. Jannatuki wa naruk. This is now an opportunity, an easy way to enter Jannah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opened the door for you to get to Jannah. In by being kind and nice and wadud and showing love and so on to your husband. Right? This is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said. So this is why she, when she gets married, to get married to someone righteous, religious, and someone has manners. And the same thing, why the man would get married, to fulfill the duties, to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be obedient to Allah so that people will enter Jannah. But when it's just because this is how things are in this life, or they met in a sinful way and they liked each other so they have to get married, then this is all grounds of trouble in this life. Unless, of course, we repent to Allah. With repentance, all kinds of goodness comes as a result of this. So this is, the hearts being attached to the hereafter, being obedient to Allah, and to remember the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where the Prophet ﷺ, when he mentioned about kufran al-ashir, and we talked about kufran al-ashir, which is kufran from kufr, meaning the ungratefulness of the good living together. Where the Prophet ﷺ, when he addressed the woman, he said that when he saw the people of the hellfire, and he mentioned why, or one of the most common reason why women entered the hellfire, if they're upon the Tawheed, they died upon the deen of Islam. What is that sin that makes them fall into the hellfire? Is kufran al-ashir, is the ungratefulness to al-ashir, to her husband. When he said, لو أحسنت إلى إحداهن أمد الدهر ثم رأت منك شيئا قالت ما رأيت منك خيرا قط. If you're kind to her all of your life, and then you do one thing that she doesn't like, she would say, I've never seen any good from you. So you might say, but my husband is not like this. It doesn't matter. One sincere advice is to remove this from our vocabulary, which is, I've never seen anything good from you. I've never, this generalizing things, we should stay away from it, because it's a sinful thing. It's not just words of exchange of dispute. Everything is recorded, and the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. And if someone that you can count their faults or their bad manners or whatever, it's counted. So versus many of the good things, then it's okay to live with it. Some things a person cannot live with it, and that's why there are things ground for divorce. And it's all based off ilm, also knowledge. But if a person, his things are not, that is ground for divorce, that means we have to live with it. This is how life is. Instead of expecting to have a perfect husband or a perfect wife, we're not perfect, we're sinful. We have all kinds of weaknesses and deficiencies, and just we need to be patient in this life. Right? Many things like this. So, but the thing is to be always grateful. And when you're being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a hadith, actually, some of the athar, where إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنظُرُ إِلَى الْمَرْأَةِ لَا تَشْكُرْ زَوْجَهَا وَهِيَ لَا تَسْتَغْنِ عَنْهُ, which has a great meaning to it. And there are many things that are being done to oppose this. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look at a woman, meaning the look of support and help and rewards and so on. لا تشكر زوجها, she's not grateful to her husband. وهي لا تستغني عنه, when she cannot live without him. Right? People would say, well, I can live without him. I have my own job. I have my own work. If it's financial, it's okay. I can take care of myself. And this is what exactly they would change in the way that things are between the husband and wife so that she's not grateful to her husband. Right? وهي لا تستغني عنه if we really think of the hereafter. A wife, a righteous wife, she cannot live without her husband. Why? Because he is her Jannah or the hellfire. She wants to enter the Jannah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the nas of the hadith. I'm not here, or we're not trying to convince each other, or someone is convincing us, or whatever, based on reason and opinions. We're talking about nusus, wahy, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing is that one of the very common mistakes or sins in this life is, for example, if you look at an environment like here, for example, when a husband, he is the one that has to be financially responsible. That means he has to deal with the haram and the halal and money seeking and people that he meets. And all of these things are means to either the hellfire, which is so many, versus to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much struggle that he has to go through to make the righteous one, to make sure that it's halal. So he's the one that throwing himself into the fire, not to bring food and bread on the table for his family and that's it. It's to save them in the hereafter from the hellfire. So he's doing a favor to his wife, and he should not think that he's doing a favor to them, but this is from a wife perspective, that he is protecting her religion. She doesn't have to go out and expose herself to the haram to earn living for her to be able to eat and drink. He's doing that. So he's the one that is being thrown into the battlefield of this life, that he would cause himself to even go to the hellfire, wal-'adhu billah, meaning that he has to protect himself from this, but so that the thing comes halal to her and to her family. And on the other hand, her original place is her place that she has, by the will of Allah, the control to make it halal. Look at the environment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made for the women versus the environment that Allah made for men. Who is more tested? And this is to be fair when it comes to the hereafter. We're not talking about worldly things. In the hereafter, the men are more tested because they have to go out and they have to meet people and they have to deal with the haram and the halal, many different ahkam and the halal and the haram and so on, versus when the woman is in her comfort of her home and she chooses to eliminate this, to put this, to make it halal, controlled environment, right? She doesn't have to be facing all kinds of haram things. Who's the one that maintaining this? Is her husband. That's why no one is the like of the husband when it comes to the wife. وهي لا تستغني عنه. She can never live without him if she's righteous. But if she's not righteous and her iman are weak, then what? Then she throw herself into this out there with the exposing herself to the fire when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it easy for her. So these types of things that we need to observe and to be warned against what we have been warned against. So to be always grateful, to always mention what is good, not to complain too much, and to seek rewards on whatever we do on a daily basis, and to recognize that this is such a great thing. Things that no man can do, to take care of the households, to make it away from haram, to eliminate the haram from it, to be concerned about taking care of the husband, taking care of the children, being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, following the ways of the companions of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, with the ibadat, with the salah, with the dhikr of Allah. A woman, she prays at home in the beginning of the time of the salah, she gets the reward as if she went to the masjid and came back. And she should make sure that her husband does this. She gets all of the rewards while she's staying in the comfort of her home, making the sunan prayer, making the adhkar, reading the Quran, memorizing the Quran. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for each and every one of us. But so again, the competition at the time of the Prophet ﷺ about who's going to enter Jannah, not who's going to have more things in this life. And with the balance of all things, this is something to be observed, inshallah. Because of the time, and just to leave time for the questions, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it's benefiting and we understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. بارك الله فيكم. من الله سبحانه وتعالى accept. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. وسبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.